Hey friends, today we're diving into a pretty sensitive topic, what designers tend to keep secret. We'll talk about things like designers' commissions, kickbacks, or hidden income, why the budget often goes up, what designers hide about budgets, setup issues people don't talk about, and much more. I think this will be an honest, open conversation that's super useful for anyone who's renovating, in the middle of a reno, or planning one. Alright, let's start with the biggest and most delicate topic, designer commissions, kickbacks, and hidden income from sourcing items. Almost all designers get a commission from suppliers for bringing in renovation clients. So if you're ordering a sofa, chances are the designer who picked it has some kind of deal with the company. There are actually two sides to this. One is bad and the other is actually really good. The downside is obvious. You might end up paying more for that sofa. But this usually happens when you're working with a solo designer or freelancer. Suppliers often tack on an extra fee for them. Big companies like ours have a sourcing department with negotiators who make sure the supplier's commission comes out of their marketing budget, not added to your price. And honestly, sourcing is a whole separate job in itself. We've got a dedicated person handling logistics, deliveries, and even replacements if something's damaged or wrong. And if something goes wrong with the item later, the client usually doesn't call the manufacturer, they call the designer like, hey, you recommended this sofa, go sort it out. Even if legally the designer or studio isn't responsible for claims, they still help the client out. That's what they're getting paid for. In our company, there's a separate department that handles sourcing and purchasing, and often we actually sell the products under our own legal entity, so the client buys from us like they would from a store, and we take full responsibility for it. The benefits are clear. The client deals with one responsible party, and the studio can earn from the product side of things, but it's super important that the prices stay within market range and aren't marked up for the client. Next up, the illusion of choice. Designers don't show you every possible material option out there. Let me give you a typical example. Say your designer picked some tile, added it to the visuals, and then you go to the store and see tons of beautiful tiles, and suddenly yours doesn't seem so great. So you feel like the designer didn't show you the best options or even half of what's really out there, but honestly, it's an illusion that anything would work for you or that one tile is just better than another. You have to look at the whole space, how everything works together. Sometimes we go with calm, low-key pieces or save on some things to afford a cool statement item, like I did in my own apartment with a unique chandelier. Like we might save on wall finishes with basic plaster, or maybe the opposite. The designer balances the budget and makes sure everything fits together visually. So when you walk into a store, it might seem like there are thousands of better options out there. That's why the coolest, most interesting, unusual stuff often just won't work in your interior. That's why designers make the choices they do. And now we're smoothly moving on to the next point. Designers don't show all the layout options that could work for your apartment. Usually, we show the client one or two layout options. But behind the scenes, we've done like 10 to 15 or even more, just not finalized. From those 10 to 15, we choose the ones that suit you best, show you one or two, and then tweak it with your feedback. Why do we do it this way? Because even showing you 3, 4, or 5 options can make it super hard for you to choose. You'll start showing them to your friends and acquaintances. First, you listen to people who have nothing to do with your home. And second, it'll drag out the whole timeline. That's why the designer, based on a detailed brief from the client, picks the best fit options and works with the client to fine-tune them. That way, we save the client time, energy, and nerves. Alright, now let's talk about issues on the construction site. Oh boy, most designers don't tell clients how crazy, chaotic, and messy things can get on site. And yeah, construction's just the same. Usually designers cover for the builders and builders cover for the designers. Honestly, designers are human too. They don't like talking about their failures and screw-ups. But usually, construction is just one of those things where something's always happening on site. The reality is, renovations are just like that. It's constant problems coming from all directions. You can't predict or calculate exactly where the next issue will hit. Basically, you're doing crisis management the whole time. Like the supplier vanished with the goods, or the drywall was done crooked. You've got to tear it all down and redo it, or the builder forgot to run an electrical wire somewhere. So now you've got to redo it all, which pushes the timeline. But the builder might fix it at their own expense. This stuff doesn't get brought outside the family. The team handles it all internally. The designer, the construction manager, the builders, everyone fixes it as a team. Let me give you an example of a problem that can happen during construction. So in my own apartment, we had a new contractor for micro cement. The supplier actually recommended this guy to us. We'd been buying micro cement from that supplier pretty often, and previously, other contractors had done great work with that same material. But this time, they recommended a different contractor. We hired him. He did a terrible job, and we had to redo everything. That delayed the whole construction process by several months. And that actually brings us to the next topic, timelines. In a perfect world, with simple design choices and everything going exactly to plan, a renovation can be done in 3 months. But usually it drags out to a year, maybe even 2, especially if it's a big space with complex ventilation, tricky engineering, a smart home system, or you're ordering custom furniture that can only be made after finishing work is done and exact measurements are taken. Or if something's being shipped from Europe or China, that takes time too. So yeah, renovation projects usually stretch out. Turns out you have to wait for some materials, and there are technical steps you just can't rush. Like when the floor screed has to dry, but someone assumed it to dry faster than it actually does. So delays pile up. A week here, 2 weeks there, a month later, and your 5-month reno turns into a year and a half. That's why you need to understand. They'll almost always tell you a shorter timeline than it'll really take. If you go to a legit company, they'll honestly tell you upfront how long your renovation will take based on real experience. So ask that question. It's a good way to figure out whether the company's solid or not. Be wary of super short timelines. They usually mean someone's not being honest with you. All right, next point. Interiors in magazines don't look like that in real life. Why does that happen? Because designers want pretty pictures. So for the shoot, they bring in tons of decor, books, vases, whatever, that don't actually stay in the space. It's hard to explain that to clients in a way that really lands. It's those little books and vases that actually create the whole vibe. So, friends, if you're doing a renovation, make sure to ask your designer if they can handle the styling or bring in a stylist. That way your home will look like a magazine spread, like my own apartment. It looks the same in real life as it does in photos or video. That shell you see? Yep, it's really there. Exactly where it was in the photos. All the decor is functional and actually used, because my place was professionally styled. Moving on to the next point. Designers don't follow every single client wish. And you know what's funny about that? Usually, a client comes in with a picture they saw in a magazine, at a friend's place, or somewhere else and says, "I want exactly this." And they go to a designer who's done something similar before, someone who's tackled that kind of style. But here's the catch. You'll finish that renovation at best in about a year. And in a year, that look will already be outdated. Plus, the interior you saw in that photo, it was probably trendy when it was done like 2 years ago. So by the time you finish doing, say, that exposed brick loft look, it's already gonna feel dated. Or like right now, green, like my socks, is super trendy. That color is insanely popular right now, very on trend. But by the time you finish the reno, that color might be totally out of style. Some other color will be trending by then. So here's how it usually works. A designer will try to nudge the client towards something new, something they haven't done before. So the designs don't all look the same. Not cookie cutter, but instead feel fresh and unique. And that's actually great for the client. They end up with a current design that's not a repeat of someone else's. That's why, in our approach, we always try to add a little twist or standout feature, something inspired by the client's personality. That's how an interior gets its unique vibe and personality. And yeah, you might be wondering, how do you make sure your interior doesn't go out of style? I actually made a separate video recently all about trends and anti-trends. Check out the link. I explained the difference between short-term trends that change fast and long-term ones that last for decades. That video will help you figure out how trends work, and whether you should use them in your home or maybe skip them. All right, next topic. Not everything a designer dreams up can actually be built. And there are 2 main reasons why. First, the designer might not have enough experience and comes up with ideas that are unrealistic, overly complex, super expensive, or picks furniture and visuals that's impossible to find or import, or just insanely pricey. So those ideas simply don't get implemented. It all comes down to a lack of experience, really. The second issue is when the designer does have experience, but there's no author supervision. Builders usually take the path of least resistance. They'll say no to anything that seems complicated. This won't work. It's not doable. We can't do this. It's impossible. Can't be done. But if you bring in a specialist and dig into the details, turns out it's totally doable. Just needs a bit more effort. That's why author supervision is usually the fix for that. For example, in our company, aside from the designer, we also have a construction manager. These are guys with serious construction experience. So when builders say, "That's impossible," they show up and go, "Really? What if you just cut the drywall a bit and plaster it? See? You've got a rounded corner. Totally doable, just needs a little extra effort." There always needs to be someone on site who can explain those tricky design solutions and help the builders figure out how to make them happen. Oh, and now for a delicate topic, actual costs and extra expenses. Anyone who's ever done a renovation knows the budget always goes up. You can't just say, "I'll stick to this budget." I've never seen it happen. It always goes up by a certain percent. So why does that happen? A few reasons. First, you're doing the reno for yourself, and naturally you go, "Let's upgrade this a bit. I'll pay a little more." And that happens with the sofa, custom furniture, the kitchen, the plumbing, the appliances, everything. You're doing it for yourself and want it to be nice. That's why the budget grows. Second, most clients just aren't ready for current market prices. Especially if it's their first reno, they just estimate, okay, kitchen costs this, labor costs that, doors are this much, and the sofa costs that. Here's my budget. But they forget about tons of other things. Like with a door, it's not just the cost of the door, but also delivery and installation. And if it's a hidden door, it comes in several parts with separate delivery fees. Plus, a bunch of materials that don't even cross your mind unless you sit down and make a list, like ductwork, extra engineering plans, approvals, or waste removal required by the property manager. And a ton of tiny details that all add up to one big cost in the end. The second thing, prices. They're always going up. A reno that cost X 3 years ago is now 10% more expensive in today's market. What else don't designers talk about? They don't tell you that if you make changes mid-project, it can seriously affect implementation and cost. Like switching from single color to RGB lighting, you'll need different wiring to the panel or transformer. So the original cable has to be swapped, which means opening up the whole ceiling, replastering it, and if it's already painted, repainting too. That's why changes during construction are usually expensive, and you need to be sure it's really worth it. Next point, not every designer is right for you. You've got to approach hiring a designer based on whether they've solved a similar type of project. Someone who does studios probably isn't the right fit for a big country house. A designer's portfolio should include actual work similar to what you're hiring them for. Someone who does penthouses doesn't do tiny kitchens. The portfolio has to match your specific kind of project. The designer should fit the scope of your specific property. Designers usually don't mention this. They want to take on every project they can. So always check their portfolio and make sure it matches the task you're hiring them for. And here's another thing. Designers don't always show their own portfolio. Sometimes the portfolio they show is a team project. Like they only did the 3D rendering and didn't design or manage the build at all. That's why you should always check a designer's portfolio and ask direct questions. Like, what exactly did you do on this project? Did you work solo or were you part of a team? We had a case where someone reached out directly to one of our studio designers. They found her contact, reached out, and started working with her independently. Later, they left us a bad review saying our designer did poor work and was totally unprofessional. Guys, a project isn't done by just one designer. It's a whole team effort. There's the designer plus a project manager who keeps the creative on track and makes sure everything gets done on time. Then there's the art director who reviews the quality of the design and suggests tweaks and improvements. And we have purchasers and sourcing specialists who help select items that are actually available on the market right now. So it's not just one person doing all of this. If you're hiring a solo designer, ask clearly. Did they do everything, or was it part of a bigger team project? That's the thing. In a team, a designer might shine, but on their own, with tasks they can't handle, they start messing up. Or they simply don't have the proper management to keep them organized and on schedule. That's why a team is almost always better than just one designer. And now, on to the next point. A lot of people pick a designer based on their 3D renderings. They like the rendering, the pretty interior in the picture. But guys, You don't need just a pretty picture or a 3D render. What you really need is a finished renovation. That's why you should always compare the designer's renders with real-life results and see how close they actually get. A lot of designers are great at making beautiful renders, but when it comes to actually building them, they don't happen. Either they're too expensive, over budget, or just technically unworkable. So the idea is great, the render looks amazing, but in reality, it turns out pretty bad because it was done completely differently. That's why you should always look at a designer's real completed projects. And finally, the last point. This one applies not just to designers, but to builders too. During renovations, storage on site is often poorly organized, and sometimes stuff just goes missing on site. It could be thrown away with the trash, stolen by a dishonest worker, or even just misplaced and taken to another site by accident. So how do you keep stuff from going missing? First, don't bring things to the site until they're actually needed. That's why you need someone handling sourcing and planning all the logistics. Ideally, rent a small storage space, like a closet in your building or a nearby warehouse, where one responsible person with a key manages everything and only hands out what the builders need when they need it. Like built-in faucet parts, faucet handles, or other little things that have already arrived. There's a lot going on at the site, and it's really hard to control everything. So you have to accept there will be some inefficiencies. Always set aside about 10% extra for things that break, get done poorly, or need rework. That's just normal, but clients rarely get told that. What really matters is the final result, not the bumps along the way. If clients aren't dragged into all the issues and they're happy with the outcome, then all's good. Like they say, the less you know, the better you sleep. So friends, share your own stories. What do you think designers hide? I shared my view honestly, but you might feel totally different. I covered all the points I could think of. Maybe I missed some, so feel free to drop them in the comments. That's it. That was my take on it. Share yours in the comments and I'll see you in the next videos. I'm out. Bye-bye.